Hello and welcome to our Voices in Montessori podcast, brought to you by the Greenspring Center for Lifelong Learning. Please subscribe to our podcast so we can continue to support your important work. As Dr. Montessori said, an education capable of saving humanity is no small undertaking. We agree, so let's get to work. I'm Tamara Sheasley-Ballas, and in today's episode, we're talking about building ecological awareness in young children, where we'll explore cultivating awe in Montessori classrooms, integrating nature seamlessly, and empowering educators to nurture eco-consciousness. My guest today is Tammy Oesting. Tammy has held positions at every level within Montessori schools and is certified to teach 3 to 6, 6 to 9, and 9 to 12 students. She is a teacher, educator, and advisor for multiple training centers, an accomplished public speaker who delivers lectures, workshops, and keynote addresses globally, and a practice consultant who advises schools and training centers around the world. Tammy serves Montessori globally through her company, Classroom Mechanics, a Montessori professional development company. She's on the faculty of the Institute for Educational Studies, TIES, graduate program, providing a Master's of Education in Montessori Integrative Learning, and she is a course liaison with Trillium Montessori. So welcome, Tammy. We are so excited to have you here today. This is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart, and we brought you in for our school to share with an all-day workshop for our staff, and now we get to bring you out to the greater Montessori community, and just welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tamara. I'm so happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you. So let's dig right in. So why is it so important to support children in ecological consciousness?
Well, I think that it is imperative for us to see the child in relation to what is around them. And Dr. Montessori had this real vision of the future human as being very interconnected and interdependent with the cosmos. And her vision of this new human is what I think might even be termed an eco-sapien, this person that is very much connected to planet Earth and to love planet Earth and care for it. And I think that as we understand the state of nature and our connections with it, I think it's really, it's part of our directive as educators to support the child's acquisition of a consciousness that cares about Earth.
I could not agree more. And we are seeing more and more that children now can be so disconnected from nature. They often, not always, but often can live lives that are very containerized, and they go from one container to another. So they're going from the inside of a school to the inside of a car to the inside of a house. And rather than being outside and having that connection and research shows this now. Research shows that time in nature, peer-reviewed articles all over the place, time in nature actually is better for children's physical well-being, mental health, even their academic growth is stimulated by time in nature. And then science also shows that children who spend time in nature, especially in wild spaces, care about nature and become stewards of the earth. So this is, as far as I can tell, this is one of the key components that educators all around the world are needing to step straight into. So I agree. This is one of those things that we have to figure it out. We have to step into it directly.
We absolutely do. And it's not just children. As we know from our work in Montessori, it is us as the guides, the adult, that must acquire this sensibility before we are in charge of being able to create environments and the conditions around children. And they learn because of who we are, and they absorb us fully in their first plane of development and then interact and engage. So the adult must also immerse themselves in this consciousness. And I think what you're talking about, this is really a discontinuity. It's a schism between humans and Earth that has been growing and growing over time. And their indigenous communities already have a kinship connection with Earth. And it's us leaning into, you know, the who we were of humanity into who we could become, which is that very connected human to nature.
Let's dig into the brass tacks of the classroom. Like, what specific Montessori principles or practices align with nature education for Montessorians?
Oh, that's such a big question, and there's so many principles. But if we first, speaking of history, let's go back a little bit to that first Casa de Bambini. And my understanding is that there wasn't one Casa de Bambini, there were about 4 that opened up almost simultaneously. And all of the recorded history of them is that they started out with these huge courtyards, and the learning wasn't happening just in the container. It spilled out into the courtyards and was promoted to be outdoors. And then I think about, just again, kind of simultaneously happening in the history, is the agro-Romano hut schools that were surrounding the Roman wall, that were popping up, that were supporting children of the agricultural workers right around the same time, and how they were adopting Montessori methodology out in the field in these literal grass huts that the children would come to. And so I feel that and then of course that expansion of the cosmic curriculum while in the forests of southern India, that the legacy of Montessori is fully embedded in nature education. And the emphasis on following the child's natural tendencies, such as their sensitivity to order and exploration of their surrounding, lends to a high transference of learning, and as does understanding normalization as that returning to the natural state. So right at the foundation of Montessori, I see nature entwined in her approach. Yet very specific principles like the prepared environment, having a prepared environment by which the children are absorbing and engaging within, that includes their responsibility to the environment and to each other, to see it holistically in that way. That principle, I think, very much smacks of systems thinking, which is ecological thinking. And then I also think about the integrated cosmic curriculum and how that creates this framework for integrating nature into the classroom as well. And then I have to just do a shout out for my dear Montessori sibling, Jana Morgan Herman, because her work on Myth or Mandate, the 3-hour uninterrupted work period, really teases out the daily schedule that Dr. Montessori initially put out. And so much of that is outside. It's based in movement and a big chunk of time outdoors. And that was a time when children were still going outdoors freely and had unstructured play. Some of the other principles I think of that are really connected are the whole 2 parts, that when we get outside, that we experience the whole, the sensory education of the child that is so nature-based. What better place than nature to explore the senses? I think of the storytelling and the connectivity of the elementary years, and how the principles of understanding the cosmogonies, the stories of the cosmos, entwine with the daily life of the elementary child in their own microcosmos. And there again, we have these same kinds of principles that are at play and connections to nature. I know it sounds really kind of wild and big picture, but I can make a case.
No, I think you are. And I would ask, just cycling back, you talked about sayings and language that reinforce the child's connection to ecology and nature. Do you want to
Mhm.
share a few of those? Because I think those could be really helpful for people as they're thinking about their own language in the classroom.
When we equip ourselves, and I will answer this, I do think if we equip ourselves as guides with this framework of systems, so that includes like networks and flow and ways of seeing relationships, that understanding of the guide kind of is integrated into our daily life. And I can give you a hands-on example in the 3 to 6 environment where I lived, and my heart still lives for so much at the time, that in our very hands-on materials that are also more abstract. So I'm thinking of card material and puzzles, which are often used to teach life sciences, that instead I would bring in as much as possible of the natural world into the classroom. So lots and lots of specimens. And one of the things that the systems thinking has equipped me to do is to continue to ask the exploratory questions, to ask the I wonder questions. And I wonder how this is connected, or what came before, or how that might be related to, or I wonder where I found this pine cone, I wonder what was next to it. And these wondrous questions are some of the language of that 3 to 6 that has a clarity in the mission of building on wonder in the child, because that is our task, is not to directly teach why this fungi is going to be found next to this specific Douglas fir cone. That it's not the why, that's more for elementary. It's that it is, and the beauty of it, and to wonder and get out my magnifying glass and to ask the questions of wonder. I do think that setting up visual systems for young children. So in this instance, we might be outside and collecting a few specimens and placing them on a piece of paper out on the ground. And then I'll draw lines and we'll create stories of how they connect, so that the child is getting this sensibility that nothing is in isolation, that all things are connected in some way, even to them. And so I want to name this experience through story, through exploratory questions, and less in being the omniscient teacher that directly gives the language to the child. While that can prepare them in different ways, it's not the whole of the experience. There's something far deeper and spiritual in that experience that I want to capture through the language.
Hmm. I love that. I had never heard that before. And as we were preparing for this year and really supporting our staff and becoming more connected with nature, our one of our folks, Margaret, actually, who supports, is
Mhm.
the director of the center, Greenspring Center for Lifelong Learning. She used to be in Lower L, and she did an activity where she had gave out different cards of different animals and plants, and then and it had a ball of yarn. And
Mhm.
they had to figure out, each one where they were connected, and then it just kept going, and it was this beautiful process and so much fun. even for the adults to
Yeah.
really think, oh, well, the hawk is connected to the mouse and it's also connected to the rabbit. And those are, and to really see this web grow,
Mhm.
really fun and really an important thing for us to be thinking about how we're all interconnected because so often we think of our human selves and then everything else just serves us. And really, all of starting to have this consciousness that every living thing is remarkable and valuable. And um,
Mhm.
so that's another way that students can engage. And one of the things that those of you who've listened to our podcast on um, creating cultures of writing in Children's House for the third year, Jennifer Shields talks about true stories. If you haven't listened to that, it's a great, great podcast. But she talks about true stories and how you can talk about these items, like a fig
Mhm.
tree. And we were thinking, wow, what a great opportunity when you're telling these true stories to reinforce the interconnectedness and how that fig tree actually needs nutrients from the soil and how do the earthworms support the soil. And I'm not even well versed in these things. I feel like I'm in this, again, this awakening period where I'm discovering so much and I can't learn enough to, I feel I have this voracious hunger now to learn about ecology in the world and plants and animals, and it's been and it's contagious. It's contagious. I think that many in the community are having some of that as well. But there's so many pieces, things that we can do when we really open up our consciousness to seeing that as our cosmic task as Montessori educators and really as educators overall. It's part of our cosmic task is developing that ecological consciousness in these children.
I absolutely this thirst that you called it a hunger. I often call it a thirst. Like I'm so thirsty for this information about the experiences I'm having. I just had one yesterday. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was headed out the door for my daily walk and heard something rustling next to me, and it's springtime. So we've got new animals are starting to appear. And as I turn, I see a snake, and it's a big snake. It's at least 4 feet long, and it's pink and gold, the most beautiful colors. And the first thing I'm looking for, because I have enough understanding of snakes to know that I want to just make sure that it doesn't have a diamond shaped head, which would tell me that it's a poisonous and one of the 5 species of rattlesnakes we have here. But it was this beautiful pink and gold mottled, long, skinny, and it was periscoping, meaning it was had its head up and it was moving its eyes, and I was about 5 feet away from it, so a little too close. And as I stepped back, I realized I was awestruck in this moment of this beautiful creature that's also a little terrifying because I don't have enough information about it. And also knowing that it's doing its cosmic task, which is to take care of some of the rodents that live in the area. And that thirst drove me after my walk. I actually, to be frank, I didn't start out on my walk. I went back inside and looked it up because I wanted to know right away and then ponder kind of the beauty. And it turns out it's a Western coach whip, which is one of the fastest moving snakes around, and they're rare. And so I was like, oh, I got to see this beautiful rare snake. But if I hadn't opened myself up to this moment to know that this snake has a purpose and a beauty, I might have been terrified and just shied away and not, and continue to feed the fear rather than the wonder. And that's essentially what I want for our young children, is to feed their wonder, not their fear of the natural world. And they're so disconnected in so many ways. They don't have enough information, so we have to give them enough information. And it's kind of that, like that story of Mario, who was in the forest, who would turn to the children and say, would you like to hear more? You know, would you like me to elaborate, to let it, give it back to the children as to what they're ready for? And what I think we'll see is a growing thirst for this wondrous state. Ah,
I
it's
love
great stuff.
that. I love that. I have to tell you, I've had this experience recently where there's a fish tank right next to the water filter. I go down and get my water, fill my pitcher, and I don't think I've ever really paid attention to the fish. And maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I realized that every time I came over, this fish, and these pretty big fish, would come and he would look at me, like, right up close, and it took me I couldn't believe how unconscious I had to be to not notice this guy coming over to just really connect. So now I talk to him and I connect, and as soon as he sees me walk in, he comes over and just he's it's remarkable. We are connected. Now, I imagine he connects with others as well. He is that he's not just a fish. I think in 2 years ago, I was, "Oh, well, it's a fish," right? I didn't get the value, I didn't get the dignity and the importance. So, I wanna circle back to something you said in there, where you're talking about the fear.
Yeah.
Part of
Mhm.
what we've been reading is David Orr, right? David Orr
Mhm.
talking Earth and Mind, great, great book. He's got another one as well, and he talks about how there are fewer and fewer people who are studying earth sciences. In fact, they can't even find professors for earth sciences anymore
Exactly.
because we've gone to this place where people can tell you about, they can talk to you about the rainforest, they can talk to you about the planet falling apart, but actually talking about your snake or my fish and knowing the names of them and the details that you shared on the snake and actually having that investment and walking around and seeing what's in the community and knowing the names of them, that has been such a big awakening for our community as a whole. We actually brought in, a somebody from, Wild Birds, and they
Yeah.
came over and they walked our campus with us and helped us identify birds in the community. I also got the app, the Oberlin,
Yeah.
Merlin app, which can tell you by the sound and also by images, because part of what we need to do is we need to be able to name so that we can feel connected. I need to learn the type of fish down there.
Yeah.
It and and so that it actually helps us to not be so fearful, because part of why parents, and he talks about this in his book, are not having their children go out in nature nearly as much as there's this fear of nature. Like, it has become something that the parents necessarily weren't necessarily out in the same way, and our media, makes us afraid of people coming and doing terrible things to us. So there's this overwhelming fear, whereas we're actually safer than we've been, at least in many parts of the world. And and so it's about building that connection, that ecological consciousness for these young people so they don't have that fear and they're willing to step into nature, to have nature be their partner and their part of the fabric of our beings.
Right. And when I think about this, I think about the 3-period lesson. And I think about that first period as being the concrete experience of what it is. And then the naming comes after. And we have skipped this first part, this experience of nature. And that, I think, is where we do need to, and there is no description that can really describe the trees, right? Again, I'm paraphrasing Dr. Montessori's quote, but it's really about getting them into that connectivity. So then the wondering brings about the naming. The flip side of that is, and I'm going to do a shout out to Dr. Priscilla Spears at Big Picture Science, is that she's always quoting this Louis Pasteur quote of chance only favors the prepared mind. That when we prepare ourselves with language, it actually deepens the experience. So if we start with experience, we get into the naming, we've reduced fear because we've had the experience first. The naming and the description and the understanding and the research and the study then brings us back to this point of experience, and it deepens the experience. And then we have more language and more observation, which I think is one of the keys to reducing fear. The more we know and understand, the more we spend time with it. I'm not saying go spend your time with rattlesnakes, but I am saying prepare your mind enough to know that, snakes are kind of they're really a little scary for a lot of people. I think it's because they don't have enough legs. Same reason why spiders are scary. They have too many legs for humans, that we have to figure out enough information and experience so that we can be with them and then observe and then be able to step away, get some more language, some more description, more understanding to reduce our fear. The next time I see a Western coach whip, I'm not moving. I'm going to observe. I'm going to be able to see what I can see and experience, and hopefully this communion, because it was looking at me right in the eye. And it's really a phenomenal experience to know that awareness, consciousness is happening all around us. Now, I think that this is powerful for us to face some fears. And I'm not saying be reckless. Don't do that. But most of the natural world is not there to harm you. And I've had some pretty big encounters in my life with animals and with, I watched Mount St. Helens blow when I was a kid. That is fearful awe, where I was very much struck by the power of planet Earth. And it really pushed me to learn and understand more about earth science. And I also think that this is so sad. This is so sad that, something as important as earth science has been diminishing in the public eye. And I think as Montessorians, we have a real opportunity. We really do. We have all the parts. I think we just need to integrate some of these parts of our understanding that the child is of nature. The child has a natural being within. Our process of normalization is going back to that natural, unconditioned state. And that is something that I think each one of us could be doing. But we have to start here. We have to start with ourselves.
Well, that's a perfect segue.
Oh, okay.
Because
That's good.
let's talk about how
Yeah.
Montessori guides
Yeah.
and assistants, educators, how do they nurture their own sense of ecological wisdom?
I think that there are many ways. I'm not going to promote that there's one way. I think you and I have talked a little bit here about a couple, one of which is perceptual awe. So when you're reading David Orr or Robin Wall Kimmerer, oh my goodness, that your mind's a little blown, that epiphany that you might have to feel that connectivity is a way, it is a pathway. So leaning into those around us that have already achieved or gained better or deeper understanding is a way. There is no replacement for getting out into nature. So if you are fearful, a lot of people are fearful about the unknown. You get there's lots of research out there on what might be in your general area. I actually love an app that I can take photos of plants and animals and fungi, and I can understand while I'm out in the field learning about what's out there. That helps me connect in a different way. My intellect is being engaged. But being outside, being immersed in nature is more important than anything. So taking some time, even if it's just sitting outside every day, and see if you can put on your beginner's mind and note something new in the environment that you hadn't noted before, that you hadn't noticed, that might give you that aha. Um, the work on transformative states, which is really kind of what we're talking about, is the transformed human, has my research is in the work of awe and wonder. And the science of awe talks about wild awe. So being in wild spaces, even if it's a tiny little patch of wild space, or late at night when you're looking up into the universe, that could be that sense of wild awe. Those are transformative states that we feel very small in this vast world, and the intricacies and the beauty of the natural world is before us, and we feel different. So those states actually build upon, we have a sensitivity. The more you do it, the more sensitive or disposed towards those states you become. And the more you can lean into your own transformation. I do think that understanding how dire this situation is with planet Earth is important, but it can be a blockade for us. And so I think bringing hope and leaning into hope, which is before us in the form of the child, that each of us has a new day to step forward. And with this new child, I think that's very, very hopeful. So to not go down the rabbit hole that could pause us in our efforts and in our ecological growth, but to really kind of realign towards, again, following the child. I think that those are powerful ways.
It sounds to me like you really are including ecological consciousness in the mandate from Dr. Montessori that the adult do their spiritual preparation.
I am. It may be a bit of hubris on my part. I know I'm not alone. But the idea of having a cosmic plan that fits into our understanding of biodiversity and of universal and human tendencies leads me to this idea of each of us having a niche, a cosmic task, a level of reciprocity back toward Earth that is within this mandate or this directive of Dr. Montessori. I do think that this new human is one that is very interconnected. And I think that the development of the cosmic education in Montessori is a clear indicator that these thoughts are in alignment with what Dr. Montessori also proposed. Yeah.
I think that Dr. Montessori would be very surprised if she saw how containerized Montessori has become.
Yeah.
And and I have to tell you, as a school leader, I did the same thing until I've really started to come to an awareness and awakening of how critical this is. And my studies are in spirituality of the child and how do we center that.
Yeah.
And part of what I am learning is that the research really shows that spirituality is innate to all of us. We are born with spirituality. It is as much a part of our development as any cognitive or physical or um, emotional development. And that it's two-thirds community and socialized. This is all
Mhm.
Dr. Lisa Miller's work. And that a piece of it for people is being connected with nature, and that being connected with nature actually is transcendent. The
Mhm.
studies show that it actually does reinforce our spirituality, it reinforces the child's spirituality. How we talk about it reinforces it. And so I think many of us, when we hear ecological consciousness or spirituality, it feels so big.
Yeah.
It feels like I don't know how I am already busy. I don't even have time to keep records on my classroom. How am I supposed to add in this whole other what are you talking about? We have a whole nother component to explore and do the work on. And so for for those of you who are out there who are just kind of entering this conversation, I invite you to consider that it doesn't have to be so big. It doesn't have to be so hard. And actually, why don't we talk a little bit now, Tammy, about some of the practical strategies that people can use for integrating nature education across the planes of development?
That's a great question. I think about in that first plane that it's really about our prioritization of getting outside and as much as possible bringing outside in. So in tiny little increments, whether it's creating a tray that is or even better yet, I've seen empty aquariums that become nature museums that within the classroom, children are bringing in and connecting with nature by noticing it where they are outside. And of course, you're going to give them a few parameters about bringing in and touching living things and etc. and collecting what that might look like. For instance, feathers are not something you should be collecting. You should leave them where they are. And yet at the same time, we're generating awareness at this very young level. Going outside and giving them a tool. What is it to give children a magnifying glass? That is a very small thing. What about binoculars? Binoculars outside. And for me as a child, I could spend half the day doing that.
I see these kid ones, and if you put them up, everything looks smaller. Actually, they're so poor, so just I have to say,
No,
believe in binoculars, and they have to be quality where the child can actually see. Okay.
thank you. And thank you for mentioning that because just like all other areas of the curriculum, please give the respect to the material being a didactic material, even if it wasn't designed by Dr. Montessori. If it's coming into your classroom, have that critical lens. Ah, there I did it again. That I know that that give them real things and the tools have to be real in
Mm.
order to work well. But again, that's kind of a low hanging fruit. If you don't have any of the resources to support that, what does it look like for you to generate a conversation amongst your leadership and community about the schedule of the day? How much of your time is committed to outside? How much of an outside do you have? Is it all paved? I worked in a downtown Seattle school that had a third floor playground. And so what did we do? We went on daily walks. We built it into our daily schedule that every single day, rain or rain, we would go outside. And what was to be explored might be in flower boxes outside of establishments or going to a park that was quite manicured, but life was still there and nature is there. So I think that there are ways for us to do that. At the elementary level, it's really about the story and to hook their imagination and then creating the pathways for their own research to happen. And it begins with the experience, and it's not relegated to the great stories. It is all the stories. When I was with Greenspring Montessori School, which is a beautiful nature-based school, by the way, that I told many stories that were not the great stories, that were things about like the jumping spider or the black hole, the tiny black hole that ripped into our atmosphere and what it did. And these are the stories that will hook us as adults, hook the children. And then it's getting out of their way, letting the language of wonder engage them to hook them into that deeper research and knowledge base. And then developmentally, we're getting into adolescence. Adolescents need to be given every opportunity to see the reason and give them a pathway to innovate for stewardship of planet Earth, and to see that any actions they are having have an impact. So again, hope is within the child. And I do think that these practical strategies of really looking how we might take baby steps, but collectively, it's the power of each one of us collectively that could shift where we are and how I think it only takes one child with that innovative, creation that could save planet Earth and save humanity in a new way, our spiritual component, because that's also at risk.
Mm, mm. Well said. Well said. I want to give our listeners one more piece, and there are many, many. I want you to know that Tammy is actually doing a workshop for us this fall. And you can go to our website and check that out. It's 6 hours on ecological consciousness. And I think that it will really provide everyone a lot to chew on and a lot to really take back and implement, because this is such an important topic. And so I just sharing that with you all, and because this is important. This is
Yeah.
important. And one of the things that we've also implemented, which also came out of the TIES program for me, was learning about sit spots. And so we have outdoor learning environments in our community, and they're attached to all the classrooms. And we have a naturalist that works with every two classrooms, basically. And so the children can flow in and out of these outdoor environments. But the first thing they do when they go out in the outdoor environment is they do a sit spot. And
Mhm.
it took us a bit, at first it was kind of like, what is happening, even for the 3-year-olds? And so they take a half a yoga mat and they find their spot, and they have a timer, and it's a 5-minute timer, and they flip that little timer over, and the feedback has been really extraordinary. I've talked to the naturalists, who are the people who are supervising, and they've they've really shared, first of all, how much the children actually enjoy it, how much
Mhm.
they get out of
Mhm.
it, how
Mhm.
children who may have difficulty in the classroom with self-regulation come out and will flip that timer over multiple times, and are even doing 15, 20 minutes of sit spots. And, the naturalist is going, Wait a second, this is the child who really struggles in the classroom to sit for a 5-minute lesson." That they're seeing a difference, for some children, really significant difference in how they're able to self-regulate after they've been in the outdoor environment, after they've done a sit spot. They're actually talking about doing a sit spot to have them go back in the classroom as well now, because it's so powerful, and just has become a natural part of the children's day and how they operate. And what a gift. What a gift to have this. And I have to tell you, I heard about it and I thought, sit spot, what kind of big deal? Like, why is this such a big deal? Well, think about it. It's actually time for the child to be in nature, quiet. This is not a chatting time. They can study. It's interesting. You watch the children, they go and they plant themselves in front of something that's growing, or they will find a stump and they turn it over and they watch the bugs on the back of the stump, and it gives them this quiet, protected time to just be in nature. And how many of our children, how many of us don't have that time built into our lives, built into our days? And what a gift to these little people who may not have time in nature, may not have quiet, may not have the ability to go within. And that giving them time to listen to that still small voice inside of themselves is one of the greatest gifts we can give these children. So I just wanted to add that to the list of things that really
spots.
doesn't cost you, and well, maybe you get a couple timers. You know, I'm sure a couple families have yoga mats that they're not using that you could cut up, and it really is a low investment, and but the key is to really having it be that when you first go out, that's what you do, and so it becomes just a part of the day and a part of their ritual.
You know, Tamara, you're just reminding me as well. And thank you for that. I'm going to continue to put that in my repertoire. I used that with an upper elementary classroom for 3 years, and they all had sit spots, and then noticed over time what happened. And it was in a wetlands. So, so interesting. But there's another flip side of that, and that is that risk taking that we can do in nature, unlike anywhere else, and how we may devalue that in our Montessori communities. And so if you have a tree and the tree can be climbed, figure out, you should give it a try yourself and see what happens, and see how empowering that is. And then what happens if that sits spots in a tree and there's movement and there's a little bit of risk, and the empowerment and that connectivity from within, I think, is underestimated. I think if we were to do away, this is my idealistic mind here, do away with playgrounds and bring in just natural loose parts and grow things, how happy the children would be, and how they could lean into their own sensibility that they are nature.
Mhm, mhm. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Okay, so we have about 10 more minutes. I want to make sure that you get to talk about your research in the science of awe and how
Oh,
we cultivate awe and wonder in Montessori classrooms. You've talked about that a little bit,
yeah.
but to help foster a deeper connection to nature.
Well, I think I kind of touched on this idea that awe is verifiably a transformative state. What we know is that it's also a pro-social emotion. And so that just means that it brings people together. And some of this work that we've been talking about ecological consciousness, is very internalized and singular, which is very ironic because it connects all things, but it can also be done in community. And so nurturing a sense of awe and wonder towards that natural world can help children develop that ecological consciousness and a reverence for all life. And when we immerse them in that, I think that it really helps them feel that interconnectivity, and it can spark curiosity and empathy. And so that emotional foundation can inspire sustainable behaviors that are rooted in care of self and the environment, and expands with the developing child further afield into community and even global initiatives. And I think about how the premier researcher of awe, Dacher Keltner, describes wild awe, or nature, as one of the primary elicitors or conditions that promote awe-related states. It's one of the most accessible conditions around us, and that they offer an opportunity for growth. I think that awe and nature for me are entwined. I think my most significant moments of awe have been in nature. It's not the only elicitor, but it is one of the most easily accessible. And so when I think about those moments and how I came away from that awe-related state, how I wanted more. I became even thirstier for more. Like when I went out on my walk finally yesterday, I was hyper aware, looking for more snakes and looking for the life that is happening right now around me. And it's that disposition toward awe that can further our and deepen ecological consciousness. So the work in awe continues to unfold. It's a fairly new area of affective science. That's the science of emotions. And in pro-social emotions, we know and understand that awe can be cultivated. We all have a natural disposition towards awe, but it can be cultivated even more. So getting outside can do that. And it's like sparking my wonder, or awe sparks wonder. Because awe is that initial state, and then wonder is the byproduct of awe. So we have to start with awe in many ways
Mhm.
in order to get to wondrous states that help us explore and deepen our understanding of all things. Awe is an area that I continue to see connected to our work and practice in Montessori, and in no other way is it amplified as it is in the natural aspects of our work.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you all, because you work with Trillium,
Yes, I
you
do.
all have a summit coming up.
We do. We are
Talk
so
a little bit about
excited.
that. Yeah.
I'd be very delighted to. So in 2020, Simi Abdullah and I partnered and created what's called Principles to Practice. We call it P2P for fun. And P2P has both a library for Montessorians at the 3 to 6 and elementary levels of digital resources. Also in 2020, we launched our first virtual conference we call the Summit. And last year, we did our first thematic summit, which you can still find on the science of reading. And this year, we really shifted our focus to Montessori and ecological consciousness. I am delighted that I was able to cultivate Robin Wall Kimmerer as our keynote. She's there for a limited time, so get in early. The summit opens July 17th. And early bird tickets go on sale May 2nd, so next week.
Tammy, I just want to say thank you. This has been, again, a fascinating conversation. We've only had a couple people come on twice, but given that you're running a workshop for us this fall on one of the burning, literally one of our burning topics that we must be addressing, we wanted to get you back as soon as we could. So thank you so much. This has been so interesting, fascinating, and really forwarding for the Montessori movement overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you for this opportunity to share more. And thank you to Caitlin behind the scenes too.
Oh, yeah, of course. All right. And I want to say to our listeners, we want to say thank you for spending time with us today. The work you do is so important. I say it's the most important. And we absolutely cannot do this without you. We are changing the world one child at a time. We are so grateful for you. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, thank you and be well.